Are you serious right now? That's what I said. Not yelled. Not whispered. Just said it. With that sick little smile people make when their brain short circuits. She didn't answer. Just stood there with her arms crossed like she was protecting herself from me when I hadn't even moved an inch. He was still sitting on my couch. My couch. Shoes off. Holding the remote. My remote. His smug finger was on the Netflix button, and the audacity of that alone nearly made me black out. I should rewind. But I won't. Because if I rewind, I'll remember that I kissed her goodbye that morning. That I went to the store on my lunch break to get her favorite stupid almond milk. The one in the overpriced bottle that smells like sadness. That I still had the receipt in my pocket when I walked in and found the two of them laughing like teenagers while my dog sat between them. The dog didn't even bark. He just looked up at me like, hey man, we moved on. So no, I won't rewind. Instead, I'll tell you exactly how it happened. The setup she swore wasn't a setup. The game night was her idea. Some innocent little evening of cards and wine and fake laughter with old friends. You know Trevor, she had said, voice light. He's harmless. He's just back in town for a few weeks. Harmless. Trevor was her ex. Not her recent ex. Not even her college ex. He was the one from high school. The one she used to cry about after 2 glasses of wine. The one she claimed broke her before I could ever fix her. And he was just in town. Right. So when I walked in that night, expecting a living room full of people, and instead saw exactly 2 wine glasses, 1 candle, and her sitting cross-legged in his hoodie. Yeah, harmless wasn't the word I used. But I didn't explode. That would have made me the bad guy. Instead, I said, where is everyone? She blinked. Trevor got here early. Trevor didn't flinch. We were just catching up. Where is everyone else? I asked again. She looked away. A couple people bailed. Jenna's sick. Cal had to work. And you didn't text me? Her shrug was so casual it felt choreographed. You're always saying I don't make plans anymore. I laughed. Actually laughed. That's the moment I knew. The room where it died. There's this weird thing that happens when betrayal sets in. Time slows down, but your brain speeds up. Every detail becomes so sharp it cuts. The sound of Trevor's thumb-pressing pause on the show I had saved to watch with her. The faint scent of his cologne on the blanket I bought from Target. The way she stood between us like a bouncer, not protecting me, but shielding him. So I said, you're really doing this? She said, you're overreacting. Trevor said, nothing. Because cowards never do. I took 1 step forward. Not toward him. Toward the truth. Tell me he wasn't here last week. When I was at my brother's. Tell me this is the first time. She didn't answer. That was her answer. So I nodded. Calm. Colder than I've ever been in my life. And I said the 5 words that ended everything. Take his side. Stay there. She didn't follow me when I walked out. That was the first surprise. Not a single wait. Or can we talk? Just the sound of the door clicking shut behind me like punctuation on a sentence I never wanted to write. I sat in my car for 11 minutes exactly. I know because the time glared at me from the dashboard like a dare. 11 minutes of silence. 11 minutes of wondering if she'd call, text, apologize, lie, anything. Nothing came. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't punch the steering wheel like they do in movies. I just sat there with my hands on the wheel, staring at the porch light she had once begged me to install because she hated the dark. Now I hated the light. Eventually, I drove. Not home, not to a friend's place. God knows I didn't have many left. I just drove aimlessly around the neighborhood, past quiet houses filled with people pretending everything was fine. And for the first time in years, I didn't envy them. Because I finally felt something sharper than disappointment. Clarity. You see, when your wife emotionally sides with the man she used to cry over at 2 a.m., you learn exactly where you stand in her world, beneath him. I ended up at a 24-hour diner I hadn't been to since college. It smelled like burned toast and teenage regret. The waitress had a tired ponytail and an accent I couldn't place. I ordered coffee, even though it was nearly midnight, and I hate coffee. But I needed something bitter, something that matched the taste in my mouth. I pulled out my phone, opened her messages, and scrolled up. Not for evidence. I already had more than enough of that. No, I was looking for the last time she said, I love you, without it being a reflex. It was May 14th, 4.5 months ago. I had just fixed the dryer she broke slamming it shut. She sent it with a heart emoji. That was the last time it felt real. Suddenly, a message bubble appeared at the bottom of the screen. Are you okay? Not I'm sorry. Not can we talk? Just 3 words that made my stomach turn. Because I knew what she really meant was, are you going to make this difficult for me? I locked the phone without responding. The next morning, I walked into our apartment like a stranger breaking and entering. She was in the kitchen making tea, like nothing had happened. Same robe, same silence, same scent of lavender and dishonesty. She didn't look at me when she spoke. I didn't sleep with him, you know. I just stood there, watching her stir the cup with surgical precision. I mean, yes, I should have told you he was coming. But you were already pulling away. That was her defense. I was pulling away. That's what she told herself to justify emotionally crawling into bed with someone who used to call her baby before I even knew she existed. So I asked her one question. When did you stop choosing me? She didn't answer. She took a sip of tea instead. And that's when it really hit me. She wasn't sorry. Not for lying, not for hiding things, not for erasing me in slow motion. She was only sorry that I had seen it, that I'd ruined the illusion, that now I knew she had already drawn the battle lines, and I wasn't even on the map. I walked past her, into the bedroom, grabbed a single bag, and started packing clothes with the kind of calm that terrifies people. You're overreacting, she said, voice trembling just enough to sound human. No, I said, folding my shirt like it mattered. You just got used to me underreacting. I didn't leave the apartment out of weakness. I left out of strategy. Because people like Darcy don't feel loss unless it's measured. If I had exploded, it would have been easy for her to play the victim. But silence, distance, a husband who doesn't beg, that's the kind of absence that eats them alive. She watched me zip the bag and sling it over my shoulder. Where will you go? She asked, as if it mattered. I'm going somewhere you stopped being a long time ago, I said. Her eyes darted, like she was scanning for a comeback, a reason, a foothold. But I didn't give her one. I walked out without looking back. And in that moment, I wasn't broken. I was starting to rebuild. The apartment felt smaller once I left it. Not physically, I wasn't delusional. But in my mind, it shrank. All the shared space, the inside jokes, the carefully placed books on the shelf meant to make us look smarter than we really were. It all shriveled into something laughably artificial. It was never a home. It was a stage, and I had finally walked off script. I moved into a long-term rental that smelled like leftover takeout and broken dreams. The kind of place where every wall had a scuff and every doorknob turned with a squeak. But it was mine. No dried-up plants I forgot to water. No passive-aggressive sticky notes on the fridge about leaving the cap off the toothpaste. No ghosts of conversations that used to matter. She didn't call the first day. Not the second either. On the third, she sent a single text. Can we at least talk like adults? I didn't answer. Not because I was being petty, but because I didn't know how to be an adult around her anymore. Every time she spoke, it felt like she was reading lines written for someone else. Someone kinder, more sincere, someone who hadn't erased me one glance at a time. What she didn't know, and what made the silence so satisfying, was that I was already planning something. Not revenge. Not exactly. I'm not the guy who sets cars on fire or airs dirty laundry online. I'm not interesting enough for that. But I am quiet, patient, methodical, and sometimes those are the people you should be afraid of. It started with a Dropbox folder. I'd had access to hers ever since we merged our cloud accounts back in year 2 of our marriage. She forgot about that. I didn't. I wasn't even looking for proof. I didn't need it. I just wanted to understand when it happened. When she crossed that invisible line between sharing a connection and emotionally checking out. What I found was worse than I expected. There was a folder labeled Clay Projects, Fall Term. Innocent, right? Except one file inside had nothing to do with Clay. It was a video, low quality, like it had been recorded in secret. The title was just LOL_this. MP4. I shouldn't have opened it. I did. The camera was shaky, like someone set a phone against a stack of books. Darcy was in the frame. So was Trevor. They were in what looked like a hotel room. Fully clothed, thank God, but sitting way too close. She was laughing at something he said, laughing in a way she hadn't laughed with me in months. That belly-deep laugh that used to be reserved for bad movies and inside jokes we made up drunk in college. It wasn't just the laughter, it was her face. Relaxed. Lit up. Alive. I didn't exist in that world. She was a different person around him. A happier one. And that hurt more than anything. I paused the video, just as she leaned over and said, "God, I forget how easy this is with you." I closed the laptop and just sat there in the silence. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I just stopped. That line she crossed, it wasn't invisible anymore. It was fluorescent. The next day, I visited my bank. Nothing shady, just preparation. You see, Darcy and I had a shared savings account that was supposed to be our future. We had rules, mutual agreement before large withdrawals, transparency, communication, all those noble-sounding things people say before they betray them anyway. But there was one detail she didn't remember. The account was created in my name, just mine. She added herself as a user later, but legally, it was under me. We had nearly $11,000 in there. I moved $10,000 into a new account, left $1,000, just to keep the illusion intact for now. No red flags, no automated emails, just a silent severing. That night, she finally called. I stared at the screen for 6 full rings before declining it. Then she texted, "You're being dramatic. Can we be adults now?" I nearly laughed. Darcy didn't want adults. She wanted obedience. And I wasn't offering that anymore. The next morning, I logged into the shared Google Calendar we hadn't used in ages. Just curiosity. That's when I saw it. A meeting scheduled for Saturday. Studio time, 2 p.m. at Clay House. But the invite wasn't from her. It was from Trevor. She had accepted it. This wasn't some one-time thing. This was routine. That calendar entry broke something in me. Because you don't just share calendars with flings. You share calendars with partners. I stared at the screen for a long time, then clicked Add Guest. Typed in my own email. Hit Save. And just like that, I had RSVP'd to my wife's secret date. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do when I got there. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. Saturday arrived with the kind of quiet that feels staged, like the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting to see if I'd actually go through with it. I wasn't sure either, right up until I found myself parked across the street from Clay House, engine running, eyes locked on the entrance. It was a modern little studio tucked between a bike shop and a vegan deli, the kind of artsy place filled with warm lighting, soft jazz, and pretentious energy. Trevor's kind of place. Not mine. Never was. I'm the kind of guy who reads instructions twice and still messes it up. He's the type who slaps his hands in wet clay and calls it therapy. I watched as Darcy walked in 5 minutes early, her hair in a loose braid she hadn't worn in years. I used to love that braid. She only ever did it on vacation, when she was relaxed, in love, free. But here she was, wearing it for him. That detail gutted me more than I'd expected. Not the cheating, not even the betrayal, but that she'd resurrected something from the happiest part of our past and handed it to someone else without hesitation. 10 minutes later, Trevor appeared. No rush. No guilt. Wearing a smug mustard-colored beanie that screamed, "I'm the guy your husband warned you about." He didn't even look around. Just walked in like he belonged there, like he belonged with her. I waited 5 more minutes, then opened the door and walked in. The studio bell chimed as I stepped inside. The receptionist barely looked up. I scanned the room quickly. There they were, toward the back, side by side, hunched over a wheel. She had her hand on his. Just like in that cursed scene from Ghost. Only it wasn't romantic. It was insulting, and humiliating, and real. They didn't see me at first. I didn't speak. I didn't make a scene. I just walked toward them, like a man checking on a wound he already knows is infected. When she finally noticed me, her whole body stiffened like I was a ghost she thought she'd buried deeper. Trevor looked up a beat later, confused but trying to play it cool. His smile faltered. My presence wasn't expected, and that made it all the more satisfying. "Hey," she said, voice so casual it was almost comedic. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer her. I looked at Trevor. "Is this your project?" I asked, gesturing to the half-misshapen bowl they were working on. He hesitated. Yeah." I nodded. "It's sloppy, uneven, cracks under pressure, just like everything else you touch." Darcy's eyes widened. "Wendell, don't." Oh, there it was. My name, finally spoken. Like she was calling me back into a reality I no longer belonged to. "You invited me," I said, holding up my phone, showing the calendar entry. I figured since it's such a collaborative experience, I might as well join the team. Trevor stood, clearly unsure if I was about to swing or sob. I didn't either. I just stepped forward, leaned in close, and said something only he could hear. She breaks things she gets tired of. You're just next. He froze. I turned to her. By the way, I added, voice steady, I moved the money. You'll notice it's light next time you check. Don't worry. I left enough for you and your pottery prince to buy all the clay your little hearts desire. She opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. You took his side, Darcy, I said, loud enough for the room to hear now. So you stay there. And then I walked out, leaving behind a bowl that would never hold anything worth keeping. I didn't drive straight home. I didn't even know where home was anymore. I just drove, windows down, cold air slapping me awake. My hands were shaking, but not from fear or rage. From release. I had finally said it. The words that had been boiling inside me like acid for weeks. Take his side. Stay there. They weren't poetic. They weren't dramatic. But they were true. And sometimes truth is the most painful goodbye of all. I turned off my phone for the rest of the day. When I turned it back on the next morning, there were 12 missed calls, 6 voicemails, and a text that just said, "We need to talk." But I was done talking. Because the more she tried to speak, the more I realized how many versions of her existed, and none of them were mine anymore. They say silence is golden, but I learned it's also a weapon, and the longer you hold it, the more damage it does. I ignored her calls for 3 straight days. I didn't block her, didn't change my number. That would have given her control, made it seem like I was running. I wasn't. I was letting her stew in the absence, letting the echoes of what I said at the studio settle in her bones. On the 4th day, I finally listened to her voicemail. It started with a sigh, then the sound of her exhaling like she was trying to conjure empathy. "Wendell," she said, dragging out my name like it still belonged to her. "I don't know what you're trying to do, but you've made your point. You embarrassed me. You embarrassed yourself. You don't get to just show up and—" She stopped herself. The next sound was her trying to recompose her tone. That's what she always did. Reset herself mid-sentence, like she was editing in real time. Then came the closer. "Let's be civil. We have things to discuss." No apology. No accountability. Just a veiled warning disguised as diplomacy. That's when I knew for certain. I hadn't even scratched the surface of who she really was. I don't know what compelled me to dig deeper. Maybe I was searching for closure, or maybe it was just curiosity dressed in paranoia. Whatever it was, it led me to a shoebox in our old hallway closet. A box I hadn't touched in over a year, full of paperwork, receipts, old Christmas cards, and random junk from our early days. Buried beneath a pile of useless coupons and a faded Polaroid of us at Lake Egan, I found an envelope with my name written on it, in her handwriting. No stamp, no return address, no crease. It had never been mailed, just sealed, hidden. I sat on the floor with it in my lap for a long while, like I was holding a live wire. My gut told me not to open it, that it was one of those truths you can't unknow. But I've never been good at obeying my instincts. I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, clearly written months ago. It was dated in the top corner, 3 weeks before our 3rd anniversary. In it, she confessed, not to Trevor, not to cheating, but to leaving me. Not physically, emotionally. The letter detailed how she'd been fantasizing about starting over in another city, how she felt trapped by the comfort of our life, how she didn't think she was meant for this kind of love. This kind of love. She wrote about conversations she wanted to have with me, but didn't. About nights she pretended to be tired just to avoid intimacy. About the moments she looked at me and saw nothing but compromise. And then she wrote something that nearly made me vomit. "Sometimes I feel like you were just the safe option. The person I knew wouldn't leave first." That single line shredded me. Because she was right. I wouldn't have. I never would have walked away. No matter how invisible I became, no matter how many pieces of myself I handed her until I had nothing left. I was loyal to a fault, a flaw she saw as convenience. She never mailed that letter. She never showed it to me. But she kept it, tucked away, like a fire escape she never planned to use, but like knowing was there. That's the kind of person she was. The rage didn't come all at once. It leaked in slowly, like carbon monoxide, poisoning my thoughts until I couldn't tell what was mine and what was her voice still living in my head. I started remembering things differently, replaying memories through a new lens. The fake smiles. The unexplained weekends with her mother that never quite added up. The girls' nights that never included photos. I thought the betrayal was about Trevor. It wasn't. Trevor was just the most convenient symptom. The real betrayal was quieter. It was years of her pretending to love a version of me she resented. Years of me giving and her tallying debts I didn't know I owed. It was her slipping out of our marriage like it was an outfit that never quite fit, and waiting for someone better to hold the door open. She didn't break my heart. She made me question whether I ever had one. That night, I scanned the letter and saved it to a private drive. Not for blackmail. Not even for legal reasons. Just for myself. Proof that I wasn't crazy. That the slow decay I felt wasn't imagined. That she had left me long before Trevor entered the picture. Then I booked a meeting with a divorce attorney. Not because I was ready, but because I finally accepted I had nothing left to wait for. This wasn't a fight. It was a funeral. And I was done eulogizing a marriage she'd buried years before she ever let me grieve it. There's something terrifying about watching someone try to rewrite the story while you're still holding the original manuscript. That's what Darcy did next. She didn't apologize, didn't own anything. Instead, she pivoted, shifted tone, reached for a new script where I was the irrational one, the bitter ex clinging to paranoia. The first sign was a text message to one of our mutual friends, Jess. A short, curated update about how Wendell left suddenly and hasn't been himself lately, followed by a classic sympathy-baiting line. I'm really worried about him. This isn't like him. No mention of Trevor. No mention of the studio. No mention of the hidden letter or the money she didn't realize was already gone. Just concern. Faux, staged, perfectly performative concern. Jess screenshotted it and sent it to me without commentary. We hadn't spoken in a while, but I guess even she could smell the rot under the sugarcoating. That was the first domino. The second came 2 days later when a different friend, Miles, invited me to lunch. Casual but oddly timed. He asked questions that didn't feel like his own. Questions like, so, man, are you really okay? And do you think maybe you overreacted a little? I didn't answer him directly. I just sipped my water and asked if he'd ever heard of the term emotional laundering. He blinked, confused. I smiled, paid the bill, and left without saying another word. Let her build her version. I had something better than the truth. I had the receipts. That weekend, I met with the divorce attorney, a woman named Cynthia, recommended by a colleague. She wore zero makeup and a watch so minimalist it didn't even have numbers. She didn't smile once, and I appreciated that. Too many people in my life had smiled while stepping over me. I didn't need warmth. I needed precision. I laid everything out. The financials, the screenshots, the letter I found. I told her about Trevor, the studio incident, the years of emotional drift and avoidance. Cynthia listened, scribbled notes, interrupted only twice, to clarify an account detail and to ask, did you sign a prenup? No, of course we didn't. Because Darcy believed in love. When I was done, she tapped her pen on the folder and said, she's not going to see this coming. I looked at her, surprised. You sound confident. She shrugged. She sounds like someone who's used to controlling the narrative. That works, until someone calmly writes their own. That's when I realized I wasn't in mourning anymore. I was building a case. The following Thursday, Darcy sent another text. No preamble this time. Just a short burst of manufactured humility. Look, I don't want this to turn ugly. We can both agree mistakes were made. I just want to move forward without dragging each other through the mud. Mistakes. Plural. Passive. Mysteriously unaffiliated with anyone in particular. It was such a textbook deflection I almost laughed. I typed a reply. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. Finally, I sent just one line. You should talk to your landlord before the end of the month. A few minutes later, she responded. What are you talking about? She didn't know. Of course she didn't know. She'd never bothered to learn which name was actually on the lease. It was mine. She'd always assumed things would be in her favor, that I'd be the one to flinch first. But not this time. Not after the studio. Not after that letter. The next day, I filed the official paperwork. Served through Cynthia's office. Clean, cold, legal. She received the papers while having brunch with her mother. I know because her sister, who never really liked her, DM'd me on Instagram to say, she dropped her mimosa. It was poetic. Fitting. The sound of glass hitting marble after a decade of pretending we were indestructible. Later that evening, she finally called. No text. No voicemail. A full call. I let it ring. Then ring again. Then go to voicemail. She called again. I answered. I didn't speak. I let her start. Wendell, what are you doing? That voice again. Measured. Soft. Like she hadn't been feeding everyone a version of the story that painted me unstable. What I should have done 2 years ago, I said. A pause. Then, I didn't think you'd really go this far. I almost laughed. You took his side, I said calm. So now you live with the consequences. Another pause. Then she said something so quietly I barely caught it. I didn't think you had it in you. And that's when I knew I'd already won. Not because she was hurt, but because, for the first time, she was afraid of what I might do next. There's a moment, just after the fallout settles, when you realize you're no longer angry. Not because the wound healed, but because the rot has finally burned itself out. I didn't wake up with rage anymore. I didn't check my phone, expecting manipulation in text form. I didn't replay conversations, wondering what I should have said. Instead, I felt weightless. Not happy. Not yet. But unburdened. That's the most dangerous kind of calm. Because it leaves room for clarity. And with clarity comes something most people never expect from a guy like me. Precision. What Darcy never figured out, in all her calculated indifference, was that she wasn't the only one keeping things hidden. She thought I was just a man who tolerated too much for too long. The loyal background character. Predictable. Safe. But she never noticed what I did every Thursday morning for nearly a year. She never asked why I stayed late at the university twice a week. She never once thought to check the name on the program in the drawer she never opened. Because while she was building a backup life behind my back, I had quietly been preparing for a future without her, long before I ever admitted it to myself. It started the week after our second wedding anniversary. We had a fight. It wasn't big. Just one of those cold wars where neither side fires a shot, but both feel the pressure in their chests. I remember sitting alone on the couch that night, watching her sleep on the far edge of the bed like I was some stranger who snored and didn't deserve space. That was when the thought first hit me, strange and sharp. What would my life look like if I stopped waiting for her to care again? So I signed up for night classes. Small at first. Digital marketing, content strategy, data analytics. Stuff I was already good at, but never officially certified in. It started as a distraction, but it turned into a plan. I kept everything quiet. Separate. I used a different email. Paid in full. All in my name. I never once mentioned it. Not when she asked how work was going. Not even when she noticed me staying up late with headphones in. She thought I was binging old sitcoms. I was building an escape hatch. And a few weeks before everything fell apart, I was offered a remote consulting job for a European agency. A job that would let me live anywhere, work flexible hours, and finally step out of the shadow I let her cast over my life. I had said no at the time. I wasn't ready. I still believed she and I could fix things. That if I tried hard enough, loved consistently enough, she'd eventually remember who we used to be. But now I was rewriting the ending. So when she called again, trying to shift gears into reasonable ex-wife mode, I let her speak. I let her offer to split things amicably, as if we hadn't crossed every line already. As if amicable had survived what she did to me. She said she wanted to avoid unnecessary chaos. I said I agreed. That's when I told her I'd be moving out of the country. Her pause was long. You're what? I repeated it. Calmly. Clearly. No hesitation. No dramatics. I took a job overseas. It's done. Paperwork signed. I leave in 3 weeks. You can't just leave. There are logistics. There's nothing. I interrupted. You already said we should move forward. I'm just doing exactly that. She laughed. Not a joyful laugh. That brittle, shrill kind of laugh that people do when they lose control of the conversation. You think this makes you look like the bigger person? I let that hang in the air for a second. No, I replied. It makes me look like the man you never really bothered to know. The best part? I had transferred the remainder of our shared possessions, what little was left, into a self-storage unit under my new company's name. What she didn't realize was that the apartment's lease was about to expire. And once it did, she'd be the one scrambling, not me. I had already handed notice to the landlord and prepaid the penalties. Quiet. Clean. While she had been busy performing grief for her friends, spinning tales about how hard I took the split, I'd been erasing every trace of myself from her reach. And she was only now realizing how far behind she really was. The last thing she said to me on that call, "You're not the man I married." And she was right. I wasn't. That man waited. That man apologized first. That man gave second, third, fourth chances. That man made space for someone who was already looking for the exit. But the man on the phone with her now? He had already packed his bags, rewritten the terms, and scheduled his own departure from a story that no longer deserved him. And he wasn't coming back. The airport was half empty when I got there. Early flight, quiet terminal. That in-between hour where it's too late for red ice and too early for business travelers. I liked it. The silence felt earned. Like the world was finally giving me space to breathe. I had no carry-on. Just a single backpack, my laptop, and a worn leather journal. I started writing in the night I left the apartment. 8 weeks of thoughts, questions, grief, and slowly, finally, clarity. No dramatic revelations. Just small, human truths that felt like lifelines. Things like, I never hated her. I hated how much of myself I gave to someone who didn't ask me to. And closure isn't something you wait for. It's something you decide to give yourself. And this one, from the last page. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting them back in. Sometimes it means letting yourself walk away without looking back. That was the last thing I wrote before boarding the flight. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not at first. Not even my closest friends. Not out of secrecy, but because I wanted this new chapter to begin without explanations or disclaimers. I was tired of being defined by the wreckage. I wanted to build something that didn't start with pain. The job was real. The move was real. The fresh start? That was the most real thing I'd had in years. I found a small apartment in Lisbon, nothing glamorous. Just a quiet place with old wooden floors, a balcony overlooking crooked rooftops, and morning light that didn't ask questions. The ocean was 20 minutes away. I went there often, just to listen to the waves. I stopped checking her social media. Stopped waiting for the next twist. Darcy faded, not like an enemy defeated, but like a chapter that no longer applied to who I was becoming. For the first time in over a decade, I wasn't surviving something. I was just living. A month after the move, I met someone. I wasn't looking. I didn't even think I was ready. But she was different. Not flashy. Not dramatic. Just kind. Smart in quiet ways. The type of person who listens with her whole face. We met at a local bookstore after reaching for the same out-of-print essay collection. She asked if I wanted to share it. I laughed and said I was just happy someone else knew the author. We ended up having coffee, then dinner, then a walk by the coast that didn't need music or alcohol or forced conversation. Just silence. The good kind. She never asked about my past, not at first. And when I finally told her, she didn't flinch. Just nodded and said, "I'm glad you made it out." Those 5 words healed something in me I didn't realize was still bleeding. Back home, if I can even call it that anymore, Darcy and Trevor eventually moved in together. A mutual friend mentioned it in passing, like it wasn't even gossip anymore. Apparently things weren't perfect, but they rarely are when built on foundation someone else already paid for. I didn't care, not out of spite, but because it finally wasn't my business. I didn't need justice. I didn't need karma. I didn't need to win. I had already won. Not because she lost, but because I walked away before I lost myself. One night, just after sunset, I stood on the beach and played back everything in my mind one final time. The fight, the studio, the letter, the lies, the move. I thought about the man I used to be. The man who waited, who begged, who stayed long after love had left the room. And then I said it again, but this time to no one but the sea. You took his side. So I said the words that ended everything. And then, after a long pause, thank God I did. Because endings aren't always tragedies. Sometimes, they're invitations.